I got to figure out, am I going to get a Morgan Stanley debit card or a Goldman Sachs debit
exactly.
card? I mean, listen, here's the thing. I don't think we really know what this means. On its face, this is a huge cultural transformation on two firms, particularly Goldman Sachs, which ushered in the era of risk. I remember I was at the Wall Street Journal back in 2002 when we finally figured out that Goldman Sachs was acting more like a hedge fund than an investment bank. There was a really good story written by one of my colleagues on this. And then at that point, everybody started copying Goldman Sachs, copying what's known as the proprietary model, where you essentially trade and take risk instead of doing advisory work as an investment banker, which was known as the advisory model. So the proprietary model, it looks like that model, which basically transformed Wall Street. You know, essentially huge amounts of leverage taken, big profits, also huge losses. And you wonder if the amount of leverage that was taken was worth the amount of losses that ultimately came. But in any event, that model is gone, and we are back to square one, to an advisory model and a banking model, which I'll tell you, I still don't understand, and I don't think anybody at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs does right now either. This is a work in progress, Carl.
Joseph? Toasters, Charlie. Toasters. I
mean, I'll tell you, the Goldman Sachs debit card is going to look really good.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but Lucas von Praag's the PR guy for Goldman Sachs, and I asked him when I could get my debit card, and he said it'll cost you your apartment. And I told him, well, I live in Stuyvesant Town, so you're gonna have to ask Larry Fink and Tishman Speyer for that.
He doesn't know you're a poor. He doesn't know you're a poor country reporter.
Poor country reporter.
All right, thanks, Charlie. Let's bring in senior economics reporter, Rich City reporter Steve Leisman with more on what all this means for Wall Street. Charlie's still wondering. I mean, we all are. It's unbelievable. What's the bottom line, you think, Steve? Really,
I think this means a world of stricter regulation. I think it means a world of less leverage. It means a world of less return on equity.
More solvency, I should think less profits.
They've come into the club. They are under the wing, and that's not for free. You don't come in and get something for nothing. And I think here's the story, right? Why does an investment bank want to be part of a bank? Bunch of reasons. The first thing is the bank itself has access to deposits that are reliable deposits. The money is there. It doesn't fly away. The second thing is the investment bank has access to unsecured credit from the bank within certain limitations. But all that comes, if you're going to be, all bank holding companies are regulated by the Federal Reserve. If that's going to happen, it means the Fed is in there more often. It's just a matter of being in your face. And the way you know that this means stricter regulation and probably less profitability is, well, why didn't they do this before? Because nobody wanted it. What they did, what everybody did over the past, several years in that post-Glass-Steagall world is they went shopping for regulators. A lot of them, like AIG, ended up, I'm sorry to say this, and I'm sure I'll get a letter from them, but they ended up at the Office of Thrift Supervision. Why was AIG, the world's largest insurance fund, regulated by the Office of Thrift Supervision? Because that's what they did. It's called regulatory arbitrage, okay? And all the investment banks, they can pick, apparently, your prudential regulator, it's called. Where did they end up? They ended up at the SEC. Why the SEC, not the Fed? Because the SEC was easier,
so
okay?
Steve, that does not answer the question of why. Listen, Citigroup did not go the way of Lehman, but Citigroup, obviously regulated by the Fed. Am I missing something here?
No, you're not, Joe.
Okay, well,
Charlie. But
what happened?
Listen, no, but
Citigroup basically bought all those subprime loans, did the carry trade.
They did
through those SIVs, right? So whatever I can't remember what they mean anymore. But they were the off-balance sheet way.
No, you're right. You're right about that, Charlie. And the Fed missed that.
Them.
The Fed missed that, and they shouldn't have. But I'm just telling you, when you look around at relatively who has more guys standing inside their
no
tent,
doubt about that.
The guys who were more regulated, and I think what happened here, Charlie, tell me if I'm wrong about this. When book value gets down, when market cap gets down to book value, there's no franchise value left.
Of course. Listen, Goldman Sachs.
There's no franchise value left.
Steve, Goldman Sachs, and we knew this as of yesterday. And that's why they were still dealing with Wachovia, Chinese money. Goldman Sachs was looking for.
I think there were several teams working at the same time.
There was all sorts of stuff. I thought it was a dual track. Obviously, this other thing was
there was a triple track, which was raising money in Asia, right? They were talking about that. But let me just say.
Steve,
Charlie.
as of late last week, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs were clearly going to become banks either through this method
or by merging with.
By merging. And the problem was there were not a lot of good merger partners. The Wachovia deal that Morgan Stanley would have had to do if this didn't happen would have been just horrible. I mean,
so my information, Charlie, is that they came to the Fed over the weekend. They said, do the deal. And by the way, what I also learned is that the Fed waived a 30-day application period to say, do it now. They waived a bunch of other stuff. At 9 p.m. last evening, the Federal Reserve Board of Governors took a vote and voted unanimously to accept the application. The only thing they couldn't waive was the 5-day antitrust review. So this actually doesn't take effect for 5 days.
Steve, could you imagine what would have happened if Morgan Stanley would have had to do the Wachovia deal?
Unbelievable.
It would have been unbelievable. They would have had
to get bad for both firms.
Everybody. They would have had massive dilution. The Chinese would have owned 49% because you had to do a deal with a bad bank to get the Wachovia $120 billion of toxic waste off the balance sheet. This would have been so messy. This is a better solution. But I'm telling you, if anybody could really understand the ramifications of this at this moment, when I get my debit card, I'll understand it a little bit.